92%. That's how many men died doing this one job in World War II, not storming machine gun nests, not flying bombing raids, not even fighting in the trenches. These men didn't even carry rifles. They were sent ahead of the tanks, crawling through enemy fire to clear minefields with sticks, bayonets, or bare hands. No cover, no protection, no way out. They were called sappers. And what they faced was pure mechanical death. This is the story of the deadliest job in World War II, and the soldiers who were ordered to do the impossible. World War II wasn't just brutal, it was total. Entire nations were swallowed by the war machine. Cities turned to ash. Civilians became targets. There were no clean front lines, only chaos, fire, and death. On the Eastern Front, it was worse. The Red Army and the Wehrmacht threw everything they had at each other. Millions of men, thousands of tanks, endless artillery. Every inch of ground was soaked in blood. It wasn't just a war between armies, it was survival at any cost. And Stalin's orders were clear: advance, no matter the price. That meant building an army not just of soldiers, but of roles designed to push forward at all costs. You had medics dragging wounded men out of artillery barrages. You had truck drivers delivering fuel under Luftwaffe strafing runs. You had engineers building bridges in the middle of machine gun fire. Every job was dangerous, every role mattered. But one stood apart. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, and it came with a near-guaranteed death sentence. These were the combat engineers, the sappers, who were sent ahead of everyone else. Their mission wasn't to fight, it was to make sure others could, even if it meant dying first. They were called sappers, Soviet combat engineers. But the name doesn't capture the horror of what they actually did. These weren't men in workshops or behind the lines. They were on the front. Always. Their job? Clear paths through minefields, cut through barbed wire, blow open enemy defences. All while under fire. All before the infantry moved. All before the tanks could even roll. The Soviets used them as human battering rams. At dawn, when the assault began, it was the sappers who went in first. They'd crawl through no man's land, scanning for anti-tank mines buried in the soil. No mine detectors, no fancy gear. Just a stick, a bayonet, or sometimes their bare hands. They prodded the frozen ground inch by inch, praying not to hit a pressure plate, sweat freezing on their skin, knees soaked in blood and snow, German gunners watching for the slightest movement. If they found a mine, they had to dig it out, silently, carefully, and mark a safe path with rags or sticks for tanks to follow. If they didn't, the tanks would hit it. Men would burn alive. And if the sappers hesitated, if they turned back, there were Soviet officers behind them, NKVD blocking detachments. Retreat was suicide either way. These men didn't carry rifles, they carried satchel charges and wire cutters. And they were expected to open the gates of hell with their own hands. The Eastern Front wasn't just a battlefield, it was a meat grinder. Sappers faced it head on. There were no trenches to hide in, no shelter from the cold, just mud, ice and the constant thunder of explosions tearing the earth apart. The ground was frozen solid in winter, soaked in blood by spring. Shells screamed overhead, mortars fell like rain. The air stank of cordite, oil and rotting flesh. And into that storm crawled the sappers. They wore no body armour, carried no rifles, sometimes not even sidearms. Only wire cutters, a length of rope, a wooden stick, maybe a bag of TNT. They moved in open fields, hunched low, every step a gamble. Each footfall could trigger a mine. Each breath might be their last. The Germans knew how to spot them. A man crawling slowly, probing the ground. That was a sapper. Machine gunners didn't hesitate. They mowed them down first. One tracer round, one flash of heat. And the man, and the satchel of explosives on his back, was gone in a blink. Sometimes sappers were ordered to run at enemy lines with explosives strapped to their chest. Human bombs meant to destroy bunkers or tanks at point-blank range. That wasn't combat, it was ritual sacrifice. And yet, they kept going. Because behind them waited the Red Army. And retreat meant a bullet in the back, from your own side. Across the Eastern Front, from Kursk to Leningrad to Berlin, the sappers led the way. They were the first wave, always. At Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, Soviet commanders needed open ground for their T-34s to charge. But the fields were thick with German minefields, anti-tank traps, and layers of barbed wire. So before the assault began, sappers crawled out under cover of darkness, digging, cutting, defusing. Sometimes they had 10 minutes to clear a path, sometimes less. If they were spotted, flare went up, MG-42s opened fire, and men vanished in the dark. At Leningrad it was worse. Frozen lakes, cracked roads, German shells falling day and night. Sappers built makeshift bridges across iced-over terrain to supply the starving city. Each trip across the road of life was a coin toss. The ice cracked, the bombs fell, and men drowned under trucks full of bread. At Berlin it was the end game. Sappers blew holes through buildings, breached barricades, cleared street after street. Urban combat meant no safety. Every wall could hide a sniper, every basement a booby trap. And still they went in first. The survival rate after a single mission, sometimes under 10%. They weren't expected to come back. That's why replacements were always ready. And if a sapper hesitated, refused to move forward, NKVD units stood behind them. Weapons drawn, no excuses, no mercy. You either died facing the Germans, or you died facing your own. For the Soviet sappers, war wasn't just hell. It was engineered suicide, on repeat. So why did they do it? Why crawl into minefields with nothing but a stick? Why march toward barbed wire and machine guns with no rifle? The answers are complex and terrifying. Fear was the first motivator. Not of the Germans, but of their own commanders. Refusing an order meant a bullet from the NKVD. Desertion. Instant execution. But there was also patriotism. The belief, hammered in by propaganda, that dying for the motherland was glory. That every sacrifice helped push the fascists back, even if it meant becoming a corpse in the snow. Some sappers were volunteers, believers, desperate to fight even if it meant dying in the mud. Others had no choice, drafted from villages, factories, schools, men in their 40s, boys barely 15, civilians 1 week, sappers the next. There's the story of Vasily Kristenko, a 17-year-old from the Donbass region. He cleared mines outside Smolensk with his bare hands, survived 3 assaults. On the 4th, he lost both legs to a German S-mine. He was awarded the Order of the Red Star, posthumously. Or Sergei Smirnov, a former schoolteacher who led a sapper unit at the Battle of the Silo Heights. He cleared a path through barbed wire while under artillery fire, then ran back to guide a tank through by hand. He survived, but was never the same. He didn't speak for 2 years after the war. Some were decorated as heroes, their names shouted in parades. But most were buried in mass graves. No names, no markers, just numbers lost to the war machine. And still, wave after wave, they kept going. Because someone had to. When the war ended, few sappers were left to speak. Their units were depleted, their names often lost. There were no parades for the mine clearers, no grand statues for the wire cutters. They weren't tank aces or sniper legends. They were the ones who made the victories possible, then disappeared in smoke and dirt. Most were buried in the same killing fields they tried to clear. Their reward, a shallow grave, maybe a medal sent to a grieving mother, and silence. No one wrote songs about the sappers. Their job wasn't glamorous, and it was hell every single day. And yet, without them, the Red Army would have stalled in its tracks. Every Soviet victory, from Kursk to Berlin, was paved with the blood of men who went first, who went unarmed into gunfire and mines so others could survive. Today, modern combat engineers still serve. American, Russian, Ukrainian, NATO, they all rely on men and women who breach obstacles, defuse bombs, and build in the chaos of war. They have better tools, drones, mine detectors, body armour. But the job, still dangerous, still deadly, and still built on the backs of those who did it first, with nothing but courage and a stick. The Soviet sappers were ghosts before they even died, but their sacrifice deserves to be remembered. Every tank that rolled forward, every trench that was crossed, was paved in the blood of sappers. They were the invisible heroes of total war. Men who were sent in first. Men who died so others could fight. Men who were never supposed to come back. They didn't get headlines, they didn't get glory. But without them, there would have been no Soviet advance. No push to Berlin, no victory. Their story isn't one of triumph. It's one of sacrifice. 92%. That's the number you won't forget. That's the price they paid for every foot of ground. So next time you see a tank rolling into battle or a soldier charging forward, remember who went first. Remember the sappers.